You can't have this earring, this is mommy's earring. Hey guys, Regan from Cowbutt Crunchies here, and today I'm going to talk a little bit more about Beidou. And specifically, I want to go into the pieces that we 3D modeled and printed for her, as well as just when in general during cosplay we want to use 3D printing. This is also just a personal preference of ours. Oh, hello. Okay, this is like a cat video now, apparently. So for a lot of our prop and armor work, I actually default to foam and Worbla, resin, that kind of thing. However, we've kind of started incorporating 3D printing more and more into our cosplays, and with a very specific reason in mind, and that is geometric figures. I love modeling and I really love sculpting with my hands and making organic shapes, but sometimes you have something in your cosplay that's just really not organic and would look really strange if it wasn't actually symmetrical. So like for instance, this is one of Beidou's belt buckle loops. And this is 3D printed. This is perfectly square and very straight and even, and that's because a machine did it. I did not make this with my hands. I'm sure it would be possible to do something like this out of foam and Worbla, and I have done stuff like this in the past, but it's really time consuming and difficult to get something perfectly geometric and symmetrical. You know, people have flaws, and when you sculpt something, it might look a little warped or a little wiggly or something like that. And with Beidou specifically, when you're working with stuff this small and thin, those kind of mistakes become a lot more apparent, I think, and they're harder to hide and buff out. I think you could do something like this out of foam if you then spent a decent amount of time filling and sanding and making sure that it is truly even. I'm not saying that there is no correct way to do this with your hands. But if you want a machine to do this for you in a really short amount of time, 3D printing is the way to go. So Beidou has a lot of geometric accessories, and this is kind of also why we decided to 3D print them. You know, again, I could hand sculpt this, but with such a geometric shape, and especially shapes that repeat themselves multiple times, once you model it and you have those models, it's a no-brainer to push the button and just print it again. It's just a matter of printing it out, making sure that it works correctly, and then sanding and filling until you get a nice smooth shape. So for Beidou, there was all kinds of little accessories on her. We've got her collar piece here. We have two more collar pieces that go right here. We've got these cute little buttons. We've got this belt, of which this portion was 3D modeled. We've got all of her actual belt buckles as well. And then on the back, she's got this entire little array of buttons going down this way. There's just so many little pieces, and that's not even to get into the gem, which was a really cool piece, and I like that a lot. But they are all very geometric, and I think it looks great when it looks like it's been machine made. So with 3D printing, the very basic steps are as follows. First, you need to actually model your piece. I don't want to really get into this in great detail because there are a whole lot of amazing videos out there that will teach you how to model, and they will be much, much longer than this one. We actually originally learned from Punish Props series of videos. I highly recommend them. I think they're very thorough and kind of help you get a grip on how to use modeling programs if you're interested in going down the route of Fusion 360, Autodesk, that kind of thing. There's other kinds of modeling programs as well that are a little more organic and sculptural. However, for all of our 3D prints so far, we have used Fusion 360 for better or for worse. It is free, which is a huge advantage point, and also I don't want to say that it's easy to learn because it's not, but I think it is definitely kind of straightforward as long as you are trying to do something relatively simple. There are simpler programs out there, but this one, I think, once you get the hang of it, you can really delve into it and continue to make more and more complex pieces pretty easily. So Fusion 360 is our modeler of choice. This is what we constructed all of these little pieces in. And then once you have modeled it, you're going to send it to your 3D printer to actually print. How long this takes really depends on how complex your piece is, as well as how fine you are printing it. You can tell your printer to print it in draft mode, or you can print it normally, or you can print it in very fine details. The difference between all of these is how thick the layers are, so each of those little slices that we're printing horizontally, you can print it thicker, which means that it's going to print way faster because we have less of them. But also the upshot of that is that it's going to not look very nice because all those layers are going to be thick and chunky, and it's not going to be as stable of a piece. You can print it really fine, which is actually what we ended up doing here, but it's just going to take a long, long time. For Beidou's hair piece, I think this took about 16 hours to print, which is a long time, but then again, you're not actually actively working for 16 hours. You're just keeping an eye on the machine to make sure that nothing goes horribly wrong, and then you can pop it off of your board, and then you have this amazing hairpiece that you printed magically for you inside a tiny box. Now, it's not ready to go, and this is one thing that I sometimes see people do with their prints, that they might not realize that they actually need to finish the product. So those layers that we were talking about, they might be fine, but they're still kind of there and they're still visible. So if you are a person who does not like those lines running through your piece, the way that you get rid of those is through sanding, as well as through priming and filling. And whether you need to prime and fill kind of depends on your piece. If this is for a contest or something that you want to be really proud of, I highly recommend priming and filling. However, if this is just for funsies, a little bit of sanding is okay. For Beidou, the first thing that we did was clip off any excess pieces of plastic. The edges weren't incredibly smooth here. There were a couple flaws and errors, and so those are things that we just needed to get rid of right off the bat. You can also see the really distinct layering here. All of those little lines, those are the layers that I'm referring to. And, you know, I could slap that on, but then we're gonna see those lines in photos, and I don't really like that very much. So after we're done clipping the piece, we're going to sand it a little bit. Always start with your rougher grit sandpaper. So in this case, we're starting with 80 grit and then slowly moving our way up to a finer grit. So after 80, we're going to jump to 150. After that, we're going to jump to 200, to 400, all the way up to 2000 was where I stopped here. Now, some people will go higher than that. If you want a really beautiful metallic finish to your piece, you can continue up all the way through. I have a friend who likes to use 5,000 or even 10,000 grit sandpaper. But in this case, 2,000 was fine by me. After sanding, I added a small amount of clear coat in order to bring back the shine, and this was done. All of these pieces were actually printed in a silk PLA, which had this really beautiful metallic shine. And in this particular case, we didn't need to paint it because I really liked how it looked. But if that is not your jam, you can always prime and then paint just like any other cosplay prop. One thing to bear in mind is that your 3D print is going to be made up of small layers of plastic that have all bonded against each other because it was extruded out of the machine when it was hot. And those hot layers of plastic will stick together and create our 3D print. Now, just like any plastic, if I heat this up, it is going to become malleable and bend a little bit. And sometimes that's actually a cool little trick. One time I printed out a flat object that I needed to be curved, and so I printed it and then applied a little bit of heat with a heat gun and then carefully bent it into shape. On the flip side, just like Warbler, don't leave this stuff in your car, don't actually leave it in front of a heat gun, or else you may end up warping your 3D print piece. I hope you guys enjoyed this walkthrough on how we use 3D printing in our own cosplays and maybe have come up with some ideas for your own. For those of you who are also looking to cosplay Beidou and want to print out our 3D accessories, we've actually uploaded all of our STL files, which you can find down in the description below. This link contains all of the accessories that you'll need to cosplay her, which you can use and print out on any machine. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.